I stood frozen at my sister's wedding reception as she clinked her champagne glass and smiled at the crowd. "Some of us marry rich," Amber announced, gesturing to her new husband. "And some of us raise mistakes." Every head turned to me and my 7-year-old son, Dylan. My mother laughed from the front table. "At least her mistake wore shoes today." The room erupted in laughter. Then the groom, Preston, slowly stood up. His face had gone completely white. The champagne glass nearly slipped from my hand as 300 guests turned to stare at me and Dylan. My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I forced myself to keep my chin up. This was supposed to be a celebration, not a public execution. Yet here I was, being torn apart by my own family. Let me back up. My name is Esperanza, and I'm 32 years old. The beautiful bride currently basking in applause is my younger sister, Amber. She's 28, graduated from Yale with honors, works at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan, and just married Preston Blackwell, whose family owns half the commercial real estate in our state. She's everything our mother ever wanted in a daughter. I, on the other hand, am everything our mother never wanted. 8 years ago, when I was 24, I got pregnant. His name was Garrett, and we'd dated for 6 whirlwind months. He was charming, attentive, and talked about a future together. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared, blocked my number, moved out of his apartment, vanished like smoke. I haven't heard from him since. My father, bless his soul, stood by me. He held my hand through the pregnancy, was there when Dylan was born, told me I was strong and capable. But he passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, and with him went the only unconditional love I'd known in our family. My mother, Catherine, never forgave me for getting pregnant. In her eyes, I'd committed an unforgivable sin. I'd embarrassed the family, ruined my life, thrown away my potential. Never mind that I was working 2 jobs to support myself and Dylan. Never mind that I was putting myself through nursing school online, taking classes late at night after Dylan went to sleep. Never mind that my son was sweet, intelligent, kind, and loved with everything I had. To Catherine, I was a disappointment, a cautionary tale, the daughter she spoke about in hushed, ashamed tones. Amber, meanwhile, could do no wrong. Every achievement was celebrated, every milestone marked with expensive gifts and proud social media posts. When Amber got engaged to Preston 6 months ago, Catherine threw an engagement party that cost more than I make in a year. I'd saved for months to buy the dress I wore to this wedding. It was simple, navy blue, modest. Dylan wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt I'd found on sale. And yes, he wore shoes. Nice ones, actually. Brown leather loafers I'd bought him just last week because he was growing so fast. The ceremony itself had been beautiful. I'd sat in the back row with Dylan, watching Amber glide down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than my car. She looked stunning. Despite everything, despite the years of comparison and cruelty, part of me felt proud of her. She was my sister, after all. But Catherine had made her feelings clear even before the ceremony began. When we arrived at the church, she pulled me aside. "Try not to let Dylan embarrass us," she hissed, straightening my collar like I was a child. "Amber's wedding is perfect, unlike some people's lives." I'd bitten my tongue. For Dylan's sake, I'd promised myself I would be gracious today. I would smile, stay quiet, and leave early if necessary. The reception started well enough. Dinner was served. I sat at a table in the far back corner, placed there deliberately, I'm sure. Dylan ate his chicken fingers quietly while I picked at my salmon. Around us sat distant cousins who barely acknowledged our presence. Aunt Martha, my father's sister-in-law, gave me a tight smile but said nothing. Uncle Joe, who used to sneak me candy when I was little, avoided eye contact entirely. I was invisible, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Better invisible than targeted. Then came the speeches. Preston's best man spoke first, sharing funny college stories. Preston's father gave a touching toast about love and partnership. Then Amber stood up, radiant in her gown, and took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for being here on the most important day of my life," she began, her voice clear and confident. "I'm so blessed to be surrounded by people who've supported me, believed in me, and helped me become the woman I am today." She went on about Preston, about their love story, about her gratitude. I relaxed slightly. Maybe the evening would pass without incident. Then her eyes found me. "You know," she continued, her smile taking on a sharp edge, "people always say every family is different. Some of us are lucky enough to marry rich." She gestured to Preston, and the crowd chuckled. "And some of us," she paused for effect, her gaze burning into me, "some of us raise mistakes." The room went silent for a heartbeat, then nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. My stomach dropped. Dylan's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. "Amber," I heard Preston say quietly, but she continued. Catherine, never one to miss an opportunity, laughed loudly from the front table. "At least her mistake wore shoes today," she called out, gesturing toward Dylan. The laughter grew louder, more genuine now. People were looking at us, some with pity, most with that ugly curiosity people have when witnessing someone else's humiliation. Dylan's eyes filled with tears. My 7-year-old son, who'd done nothing wrong, who'd been excited to wear his nice clothes and attend a fancy wedding, was being mocked by his own grandmother and aunt in front of hundreds of strangers. My heart shattered. Then Preston stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. The laughter died instantly. His face had drained of all color, and his jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. He removed his microphone carefully, deliberately, and walked to Amber. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Whatever he said made her smile falter. Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth to respond, but Preston was already walking away. He walked straight through the reception hall, past the shocked guests, past the elaborate floral arrangements and the towering wedding cake, and out the main doors. He just left. His own wedding reception. The silence that followed was deafening. Amber stood frozen at the microphone, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. Then she gathered her dress and ran after him, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. 300 guests sat in stunned silence, their champagne glasses suspended halfway to their lips, their forks hovering over their plates. And I sat in the back corner, holding my crying son, wondering what on earth had just happened. The reception hall erupted into chaos within seconds. Whispers became excited chatter. Heads swiveled back and forth between the exit where Preston and Amber had disappeared and the front tables where the families sat looking shocked. Amber's bridesmaids, 5 women in matching lavender dresses, jumped up and rushed toward the exit, their faces masks of concern and barely concealed curiosity. The band, which had been preparing to play, stood frozen with instruments in hand, unsure whether to continue. Catherine's face had turned a mottled red. She stood abruptly, her chair toppling backward, and pointed directly at me. "This is your fault," she spat, her voice carrying across the now quieter room. "You've ruined everything just by being here." I felt every eye in the room turn to me again. My hands were shaking. Dylan was still crying softly, his face buried against my side. "You need to leave," Catherine continued, striding toward my table. "Right now. Get out. You've already destroyed enough." I'd promised myself I would stay calm. I'd promised I would be gracious. But something inside me was cracking. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly, standing up and gathering Dylan close. "I've been sitting here quietly all evening." "Your presence is enough," Catherine hissed, now standing directly in front of me. "You're an embarrassment. You've always been an embarrassment. And now, you've ruined your sister's wedding day." I blinked back tears, refusing to let her see me break. "Come on, Dylan," I whispered. "Let's go." I picked up my small purse, and took Dylan's hand. He was still crying, confused, and hurt. As we turned to leave, weaving between tables of gawking guests, a voice stopped us. "Excuse me. Please wait." I turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s approaching us. She wore a stunning silver gown and carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from old money and good breeding. I recognized her from the ceremony. Diane Blackwell, Preston's mother. "Please don't leave," she said gently, her eyes kind. "None of this is your fault." "Mrs. Blackwell, I appreciate that, but I think it's best if we go," I said, my voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "I heard what your sister said," Diane continued, stepping closer. "And what your mother added? It was unconscionable, cruel beyond measure." She glanced down at Dylan, who was peeking up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "And to say such things about this handsome young man? Unforgivable." "Thank you," I whispered, "but really, we should just go. I don't want to cause more problems." "You haven't caused any problems," Diane said firmly. She placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Please stay, have some dinner. Let me get to know you and your son. I insist." I hesitated. Part of me wanted nothing more than to flee, to get Dylan away from this toxic environment. But another part of me, the part that was so tired of running and hiding and apologizing for existing, wanted to stay. "Please," Diane said again, her smile warm and genuine. "It would be my pleasure." I glanced at Catherine, who looked like she might explode. Then I looked at Dylan, whose tears had stopped as he watched Diane with cautious hope. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Thank you." Diane led us to a different table, closer to the front, where some of Preston's family Saturday, she introduced us warmly. "This is Esperanza and her son Dylan. They'll be joining us for dinner." Preston's aunt and uncle greeted us politely, and soon Dylan was engaged in conversation with Preston's cousin, a boy about his age who wanted to show him something on his tablet. Dylan's face brightened for the first time all evening. Diane asked me about my life, and for once, someone actually listened to my answers. I told her about my nursing classes, about working at the dental office in the mornings and waitressing at night. I told her about Dylan's love of books and science, how he wanted to be an astronaut someday. "Your son is remarkable," Diane said, watching Dylan laugh at something Preston's cousin had shown him. "And so are you. Working 2 jobs while getting your degree and raising a child alone? That takes extraordinary strength." I felt tears prick my eyes again, but this time they weren't from humiliation. When was the last time someone had acknowledged my efforts? When had anyone said I was doing well instead of focusing on how I'd failed? 20 minutes later, Preston returned. He walked back into the reception hall alone. His tie loosened, his face grim. The room fell silent again as people watched him cross the floor. He scanned the crowd until his eyes landed on our table. He walked straight to us. "Esperanza," he said, his voice formal and tight with controlled emotion. "I'm so sorry. May I speak with you for a moment?" I nodded, standing on shaky legs. Diane gave me an encouraging nod. Preston led me a few feet away, to a spot where we could talk somewhat privately, though I was aware of dozens of people watching and probably trying to read our lips. "I need to apologize," Preston began, running a hand through his hair. "What Amber said to you, what your mother added, was cruel and unacceptable. No one deserves to be spoken to that way, especially not at a celebration that's supposed to be about love and family. It's not your fault," I said quietly, "but thank you." "There's more," Preston said, pulling out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. "I need to tell you something. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator to look into Amber's past before we married." My stomach clenched. "Why would you do that?" "It's something my father always did before major business decisions," Preston explained. "We've been burned before by people who weren't what they claimed to be. I know it sounds cold, but with the amount of wealth involved in a marriage at our level, I had to be sure." I followed his advice. He took a breath, his jaw clenching again. "What I found, Esperanza. He paused, meeting my eyes. Your sister has been lying about a lot of things, including about you. My heart was pounding. What do you mean? Preston pulled up an email on his phone and handed it to me. Read this. I took the phone with trembling hands and began to read. It was a report from an investigator named Thomas Garrett, no relation to Dylan's father. As I read, the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The investigator had discovered that 8 years ago, Amber had stolen $15,000 from a savings account. My savings account. I read the words 3 times before they fully sank in. Bank records, transaction dates, account numbers. It was all there, documented in cold, professional language that made my head spin. I don't understand, I whispered, though part of me was beginning to. Your father set up a separate savings account for you before he died, Preston explained gently. He put $15,000 in it. It was supposed to be for your education, for Dylan, for your future. I remembered now. Dad had mentioned something about it during one of our last conversations, when he was in the hospital after his first heart attack. He'd squeezed my hand and said he'd made sure I'd be taken care of, that there was money set aside. But when I'd finally gotten the paperwork and contacted the bank months after his funeral, they told me there had been a clerical error. The account existed, but the money had never been properly deposited. I'd been too grief-stricken and overwhelmed to fight it. Amber forged documents, Preston continued, his voice hard. She had herself added as a cosigner on the account, claiming she needed access to help you manage it while you were dealing with your father's death and a new baby. Then she withdrew every penny. No, I breathed. But even as I said it, I knew it was true. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. She used that money as her initial investment in the stock market, Preston said. It was the seed money that started her so-called successful career in finance. She's built her entire professional reputation on money she stole from you. I felt like I might throw up. $15,000. That money could have changed everything. I could have finished my bachelor's degree. I could have afforded better childcare for Dylan. I could have avoided some of the crushing debt I'd accumulated just trying to survive. There's more, Preston said grimly. He scrolled to another email. Amber told me that 6 months ago, at a family dinner, you tried to seduce me. She said you cornered me in the kitchen, made inappropriate advances, and that you've always been unstable and jealous of her success. My mouth fell open. That never happened. I've never even met you before today. I know, Preston said. That's why I started digging deeper. The investigator discovered that Amber has lied about multiple things. She told me she had a trust fund from her grandparents. She doesn't. She told me she graduated top of her class at Yale. She graduated in the middle of her class with decent but not exceptional grades. She told me she'd never been engaged before. She was engaged 2 years ago to someone else, broke it off 3 weeks before the wedding. Diane had joined us now, her face grave as she listened to her son's revelations. Preston, she said softly, are you certain about all of this? I have bank records, Mom, Preston said. I have forged signatures that handwriting experts have verified. I have email exchanges between Amber and a financial advisor where she specifically mentions using funds from a family account as her starting capital. The investigator traced everything. I was shaking so hard I thought my legs might give out. Why didn't you say anything before? Why marry her if you knew all this? I only got the final report yesterday, Preston admitted, looking miserable. I've been in shock, trying to figure out what to do. I thought maybe I could confront her privately, give her a chance to explain. But then, tonight, when she said those things about you and your son, his voice broke. I realized I was about to marry someone capable of genuine cruelty, someone who could steal from her own sister and then mock her publicly for the hardship that theft helped cause. A commotion near the entrance made us all turn. Catherine was marching toward us, her face purple with rage, clearly having heard at least part of the conversation from her nearby eavesdropping position. How dare you, she spat at Preston. You're believing some investigator over my daughter? Over your own wife? She's not my wife, Preston said coldly. Not really. And yes, Mrs. Thompson, I'm believing bank records and legal documents over someone who's proven herself to be a liar. This is absurd, Catherine sputtered. Esperanza has always been jealous of Amber. This is probably some scheme she cooked up to ruin her sister's happiness. I didn't know anything about this until 5 minutes ago, I said, finding my voice. I didn't even know Preston existed until today. Mrs. Thompson, Diane said, her voice like ice. My son has physical evidence. Bank statements. Forged signatures. If you'd like, we can involve the police right now and make this an official criminal matter. Is that what you want at your daughter's wedding reception? Catherine's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Because that's exactly what should happen. We all turned to see Amber standing at the edge of our group. Her makeup was streaked, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild. She'd clearly been crying, but now her face was twisted with rage. You've heard everything, haven't you? She said, stalking toward me. You couldn't stand it, could you? Couldn't stand that I succeeded while you got knocked up and ruined your life? Amber, Catherine warned. But Amber ignored her. That money would have been wasted on you, Amber continued, her voice rising. You would have blown it on diapers and baby formula. I invested it. I made something of myself. I built a career. What have you done? You're a waitress with a fatherless kid and a half-finished nursing degree you'll probably never complete. The cruelty in her voice was stunning. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or jealousy. This was genuine hatred. That money was mine, I said, my own voice growing stronger. It was left to me by our father. You stole it. I borrowed it, Amber shot back. You never would have done anything worthwhile with it anyway. You forged legal documents, Preston said, his voice cutting. That's not borrowing. That's theft. That's fraud. Amber's eyes swung to him, and for a moment I saw fear flicker across her face. Then it hardened into defiance. Preston, she's manipulating you. Can't you see? She probably planned this whole scene. Poor little Esperanza, always the victim. She's probably been feeding information to your investigator, making things up. The investigator has never spoken to Esperanza, Preston said flatly. She didn't know anything about this investigation. Your lies are catching up with you, Amber. Amber looked around wildly, at the growing crowd of guests, watching the drama unfold. At her mother, who was frantically trying to signal her to stop talking, at Preston's cold, disgusted face. The wedding is over, Amber, Preston said quietly. The marriage might be too. Amber's face crumpled. You can't do this. We just got married. You can't just walk away. Watch me, Preston said, and turned his back on her. The wedding reception had fully devolved into chaos. Guests were no longer pretending not to watch. They'd formed a loose circle around us, drinks in hand, eyes wide, like spectators at the world's most expensive reality show. Catherine's carefully constructed social facade was cracking. Her face was red, her movements jerky with barely contained fury. But instead of directing that fury at Amber, who'd just been caught in multiple lies and admitted to theft, she turned it on me. This is all your fault, she hissed, advancing on me with frightening intensity. Everything was perfect until you showed up. You've destroyed your sister's wedding day. You've humiliated this family in front of everyone who matters. Mom, I said, my voice shaking but firm, I didn't do any of this. I've been sitting quietly all evening. Amber's the one who mocked me. She's the one who stole from me. You've always been a burden, Catherine spat. And suddenly words were pouring out of her like poison that had been bottled up for years. From the moment you got pregnant, you became an anchor around this family's neck. Do you have any idea what it's been like for me? Having to explain you to our friends? Having to make excuses for why my daughter threw her life away? Each word was a knife. I'd heard variations of this before, but never in public, never with such venom. You want to know the truth, Esperanza? Catherine continued, her voice growing shriller. Your father's heart attack? That was because of you. The stress of your situation, the embarrassment, the financial strain of helping you, it killed him. You killed your own father. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd feared this. Late at night, in my darkest moments, I'd wondered if it was true. Dad's heart attack had come just 6 months after Dylan was born, during the hardest period of my life when I was struggling with postpartum depression and overwhelming debt. Dad had been helping me financially, supporting me emotionally, defending me to Catherine. Had that stress contributed to his death? Dylan was crying openly now, clinging to my leg. "Mommy," he sobbed, "I want to go home." "We're leaving," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But as I turned, Catherine grabbed my arm. "Oh no," she said. "You're going to stay and face what you've done. You're going to apologize to your sister and to Preston's family for causing this scene." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was seeing Dylan's tears. Maybe it was the years of accepting blame I didn't deserve. Maybe it was finally learning the truth about the stolen money and realizing how different my life could have been. "No," I said, pulling my arm away. "I'm done, Mom. I'm done apologizing for existing. I'm done accepting blame for other people's choices. I'm done being your scapegoat." Catherine's eyes widened. I'd never spoken to her like this before. "I've spent 8 years apologizing," I continued, my voice growing stronger. 8 years trying to make up for the terrible sin of becoming a mother. 8 years accepting your disappointment and your cruelty. But you know what? I'm not sorry anymore. I'm not sorry I have Dylan. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm not sorry I'm working 2 jobs and going to school and building a life for us. That's not embarrassing. That's survival. That's strength. "You're a waitress with a fatherless child," Catherine said viciously, but I heard the desperation in her voice now. "You're nothing." "She's raising a beautiful child while working toward a career helping others," Diane Blackwell interjected firmly, stepping beside me. "She's showing more dignity and grace under fire than anyone else in this room. Mrs. Thompson, the only disappointment here is your failure to see your daughter's strength." Several guests murmured in agreement. I saw heads nodding, heard whispered conversations shifting from judgment to support. Then another voice joined in. An older woman I vaguely recognized stood up from a table near the back. "Catherine, I've stayed quiet for too long." It was Aunt Helen, my father's younger sister. I hadn't seen her in years. After Dad's funeral, she'd disappeared from family events. I'd assumed she'd sided with Catherine's version of things. "Your husband, my brother, would be ashamed of how you've treated Esperanza," Aunt Helen said, walking toward us with surprising steadiness for a woman in her 70s. "He'd be appalled by what I've witnessed tonight." "Helen, stay out of this," Catherine warned. "No," Aunt Helen said. "I've stayed out of it long enough. I've watched you poison this family with your bitterness and your favoritism, but I won't watch you destroy Esperanza anymore." She reached me and took my free hand, the one not holding Dylan. Her grip was warm and solid. "I need to tell you something, sweetheart," she said to me. "I've been sending you money. Small checks every few months. Did you get them?" I thought back to the anonymous checks that had appeared in my mailbox over the years. $200 here, $300 there. Never with a note, always from a bank I didn't recognize. I'd been afraid they were mistakes, but I'd been too desperate to question them. They'd kept us afloat during the worst times. "That was you?" I whispered. "That was me," Aunt Helen confirmed. "I wanted to do more, but I was afraid Catherine would cut me off from the family entirely if she knew I was helping you. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner." "You knew about the stolen money?" Preston asked. Aunt Helen's face hardened. "I did. I've known for years, and I've been gathering evidence." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With shaking hands, she pulled up a recording. "This is from Thanksgiving last year," she said. I started recording family gatherings after I realized what was happening. I thought maybe someday I'd have the courage to do something with what I learned. She pressed play. Catherine's voice filled the awkward silence. At least the life insurance made it worthwhile. 500,000 might not seem like much to some people, but it's been more than enough to make up for having to deal with Esperanza's situation. There was a pause, then Amber's voice. How long did you wait before calling 911? Catherine's laugh, cold and calculating. As long as I could. He was already unconscious. A few extra minutes wouldn't have made a difference anyway. The recording continued. At least, we don't have to pretend to support her anymore. Let her struggle on her own? And that money she thinks went missing from her account? That was all yours, wasn't it? Amber, giggling. Every penny. Best investment I ever made. She got exactly what she deserved. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Every person in that reception hall had heard Catherine admitting she'd deliberately delayed calling for help when my father had his heart attack. They'd heard her laugh about it. They'd heard Amber confirm she'd stolen my money and felt no remorse. Dylan's crying had stopped. He was staring at Catherine with an expression no 7-year-old should have to wear, understanding. Realization that his grandmother had never loved him, had never loved either of us. Preston's face had gone from pale to ashen. His mother looked like she might faint. Other guests were whispering frantically, some pulling out their phones. Catherine tried to speak, to explain, but nothing came out. Her mouth opened and closed silently. The woman who always had cutting words ready was finally speechless. Amber, however, found her voice. That recording is out of context. You can't just record people without their permission. Actually, I can, Aunt Helen said calmly. We're in a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal. And I was part of that conversation. You've ruined everything, Amber shrieked at me, her face ugly with rage. My wedding, my marriage, my reputation. Are you happy now? I didn't ruin anything, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. You did this to yourself, both of you. The reception hall buzzed with frantic energy. Guests were talking rapidly, some making phone calls, others recording on their phones, capturing what would undoubtedly become the most talked-about wedding disaster in our city's social history. Preston's hand went to his phone. I'm calling our family attorney. He's here tonight as a guest. We need to discuss legal options immediately. Legal options? Catherine finally found her voice, though it came out strangled. You can't be serious. That recording is fake. Helen edited it or something. I have the original file with metadata showing date, time, and location, Aunt Helen said, holding up her phone. I also have additional recordings from other family events. Would you like to hear more? Catherine's face cycled through several expressions before settling on desperate pleading. Helen, please. We're family. Don't do this. Family? Aunt Helen repeated bitterly. You've used that word to manipulate and control for years. But family is supposed to mean love and support, not theft and cruelty. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s approached our group. I recognized him from the ceremony. He'd been seated in the front row on Preston's side. Preston, he said quietly. I'm here. What do you need? Marcus, Preston said, gesturing to me. This is Esperanza, Amber's sister. Based on what we've heard tonight, she has grounds for legal action against both Amber and Mrs. Thompson for theft, fraud, and emotional distress. Will you represent her? Marcus Chen, despite his name, was third-generation American with a distinguished career in family law. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Pro bono, he said. I'll represent you at no cost, Esperanza. What I've witnessed tonight is unconscionable. I can't afford a lawyer, I started to say, but Marcus held up a hand. You're not paying. Consider it my wedding gift. though not to the couple I originally expected to celebrate. His dry tone drew nervous laughter from nearby guests. "This is insane," Amber said, looking around wildly. "Preston, you can't let them do this. We just got married. For better or worse, remember?" "For better or worse doesn't include fraud and theft," Preston said coldly. "Marcus, I also need you to begin annulment proceedings, immediately." "An annulment requires specific grounds," Marcus said carefully. "In this state, fraud is one of them. If Amber misrepresented material facts about herself before the marriage, and you married based on those false representations, you may have a case. She lied about her financial status, her education achievements, her past relationships, and her character," Preston said. "I have documentation of all of it. Is that sufficient?" Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. "Potentially, yes. We'll need to review everything carefully. But, Preston, I need to warn you. This will be public, messy, expensive." "I don't care," Preston said. "I will not stay married to someone capable of this level of cruelty and deception." Diane placed a hand on her son's arm. "Are you absolutely certain, darling? This is a major decision." "Mom, she stole from her own sister," Preston said, his voice breaking slightly. "She watched Esperanza struggle for years, knowing she'd taken the money that could have helped. Then, she mocked her publicly for that struggle. What kind of person does that?" "Not someone you want to spend your life with," Diane agreed softly. Amber tried a different approach, her voice turning pleading. "Preston, please. I made mistakes. I was young. The money, yes, I took it, but I can pay it back. The things I said tonight, I was just nervous. I didn't mean them." "You meant every word," Preston said. "I saw your face. You enjoyed hurting her." Catherine, seeing her carefully constructed world collapsing, made one last desperate attempt at control. She grabbed a champagne flute from a nearby table and hurled it at the ground near my feet. Crystal exploded across the marble floor. "Enough!" she screamed. "All of you, enough! Esperanza, this is what you wanted, isn't it? To destroy your sister's happiness because you couldn't have any of your own?" "All I wanted," I said quietly, pulling Dylan closer as we stepped away from the broken glass, "was to attend my sister's wedding without being humiliated. That's all. I didn't ask for any of this." "Mrs. Thompson," Marcus said firmly, "I strongly suggest you stop talking. Anything you say right now can and will be used in legal proceedings." More guests were pulling out phones now, recording the confrontation. This wouldn't just be gossip. This would be evidence. Aunt Helen pulled me aside slightly, speaking low. "I have more than just that recording, sweetheart. I have bank statements showing Catherine spent most of your father's life insurance money on herself and Amber. Trips to Europe. A new car for Amber. Renovations on Catherine's house. Meanwhile, you were struggling to pay for Dylan's surgery when he was 3. My mind flashed back to that terrifying time. Dylan had needed his tonsils and adenoids removed. The operation itself wasn't that expensive, but complications had led to an extra night in the hospital. Even with my insurance, the bills had been crushing. I'd called Catherine desperate, asking for help. She'd refused, said she couldn't afford it, that I needed to learn to manage my own problems. All while sitting on $500,000 in life insurance money that should have been shared between us as Dad's daughters. "He had medical bills?" Diane asked, having overheard. She looked at Dylan with deep compassion. "What happened, sweetie?" Dylan, who'd been quiet through most of the confrontation, finally spoke up. His voice was small, but clear. "I couldn't breathe at night. The doctor said my tonsils were too big. Mommy took care of me after the operation. She slept in the hospital chair next to my bed for 2 whole nights." "You're a brave young man," Diane said gently. "And you have a very strong mother." Marcus was making notes on his phone. Medical expenses for a minor that could have been alleviated by life insurance funds intended for the child's benefit. That's another layer. "Mrs. Thompson, you may want to consult your own attorney at this point." Catherine's bravado finally crumbled. She sank into a nearby chair, her face in her hands. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his eyebrows rose. "This is interesting," he said slowly. "I have a colleague in my office working on another matter. I asked him to run a quick search based on something Preston mentioned earlier." He looked at me. "Esperanza, Dylan's father. His name was Garrett, correct? Garrett Walsh?" My heart stopped. "Yes." "How did you know his last name?" "Preston's investigator had it in the file. My colleague just found something." Marcus turned his phone to show me a screen. "Garrett Walsh has been making child support payments for the past 7 years. Did you know that?" The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What?" "No." He disappeared. I never heard from him again after I told him I was pregnant. "The payments have been going to an account," Marcus said, scrolling through information. "An account in Dylan's name. But the account was set up by," he looked up at Catherine, "by you, Mrs. Thompson. You're listed as the custodian." Every head swiveled to Catherine. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Marcus scrolled more. "The payments varied, but averaged around $500 per month over 7 years. He calculated quickly. Approximately $42,000, plus interest. I couldn't breathe. $42,000. Money meant for my son. Money I'd never known existed. "You stole child support?" Diane's voice was sharp with disbelief. "From your own grandson?" Catherine said nothing. She just stared at the floor. "There's more," Marcus continued, still reading. "According to these records, Garrett Walsh also attempted to contact Esperanza multiple times. Emails, certified letters, phone calls, all sent to an address that appears to be yours, Mrs. Thompson. Did you receive correspondence from Dylan's father?" "I don't remember," Catherine mumbled. "The Postal Service keeps records of certified mail," Marcus said. "Someone signed for 18 certified letters over a 6-year period. The signature matches other documents we have with your name, Mrs. Thompson. 18 letters. Garrett had tried to contact me 18 times, and I'd never known." "Where is he now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Do you know?" Marcus made a quick call. After a brief conversation, he hung up and looked at me with something like wonder. My colleague tracked him down. He's living 2 states away, remarried. Works as an engineer. And Esperanza, according to my colleague's quick research, he's been trying to find you for years. He thought you'd rejected him, that you didn't want him involved. Just as I'd thought he'd abandoned us. "He's on the phone right now," Marcus said gently. "Would you like to talk to him?" My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped Marcus's phone when he handed it to me. Dylan looked up at me, his eyes wide with confusion and hope. "Hello?" I said, my voice cracking. "Esperanza?" The voice on the other end was older, deeper than I remembered, but unmistakably Garrett's. "Is it really you?" "It's me," I whispered. "Garrett. I don't understand. I thought you left. I thought you didn't want anything to do with us." "What?" "No. God. No." His voice broke. "Esperanza, I tried everything. I sent letters, emails. I called your mother's house dozens of times. Every time she told me you didn't want to hear from me, that you'd moved on, that you'd threatened to file harassment charges if I didn't stop trying to contact you." Tears were streaming down my face. "I never got any of it. I never knew." "I've been paying child support through the state system," Garrett continued, talking fast, like he was afraid the connection would break. "I set it up as soon as I found out your mother's name and address through public records. The state was supposed to forward it to you. They said they were." "It went to an account my mother controlled," I said, looking at Catherine, who had shrunk into herself. "I never saw a penny of it." Garrett made a sound like he'd been punched. 7 years. I've missed 7 years of my son's life because of lies. "His name is Dylan," I said softly. "He's right here. He's 7 years old. He's smart and kind and wonderful." Can I talk to him? Garrett's voice was thick with emotion. Please? I looked down at Dylan, who'd been listening to every word. There's someone who wants to talk to you, sweetheart. It's your father. Dylan's eyes went huge. I put the phone on speaker and held it between us. Hi, Dylan, Garrett said gently. I'm your dad. I know this is really confusing, but I want you to know that I've wanted to meet you for your whole life. I've thought about you every single day. Why didn't you come find us? Dylan asked, his voice small. I tried, buddy. I tried so hard. But some people kept us apart. But I'm going to fix that now. If your mom says it's okay, I'd like to come meet you. Maybe next week? We could go to a park or get ice cream. Whatever you want. I like science museums, Dylan offered tentatively. And pizza. Science museums and pizza, Garrett repeated, and I could hear the smile in his voice. That sounds perfect. Your mom and I will work out the details, okay? Okay, Dylan said, a small smile appearing on his tear-streaked face. Marcus gently took the phone back. Mr. Walsh, this is Marcus Chen, an attorney. I'm going to need to speak with you about establishing formal custody arrangements and recovering the misappropriated child support funds. Can you hold for just a moment? He muted the call and looked at me. Esperanza, are you comfortable with him being involved in Dylan's life? I don't know him anymore, I admitted. But Dylan deserves to know his father. If Garrett wants to be involved, we can try. Slowly. With supervision at first. Smart, Marcus approved. We'll arrange everything properly. Now, let's address the immediate situation. He turned to Catherine and Amber, both of whom looked like they wished the floor would swallow them. Mrs. Thompson, you have two choices, Marcus said crisply. You can transfer the $42,000 in child support funds to Esperanza immediately, plus agree to a settlement regarding the life insurance money. Or we can pursue criminal charges for theft, fraud, and custodial interference. Given the recording we have of you admitting to deliberately delaying emergency services for your husband, I don't think the police will look favorably on your character. You can't prove I delayed anything, Catherine said, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, we can request the 911 call records, Marcus said. We can establish a timeline. We can interview the paramedics who responded. If there's evidence you waited to call while your husband was having a heart attack, that could potentially be criminally negligent homicide. Catherine's face went gray. You wouldn't. Try me, I said, finding strength I didn't know I had. You've spent 8 years making me feel worthless. You've stolen from your grandson. You kept his father away from him based on lies. You let Dad die without getting help as fast as you could. You're lucky I'm only asking for money instead of watching you be led away in handcuffs. Diane squeezed my shoulder supportively. Amber, Marcus continued, you owe Esperanza $15,000 plus 8 years of interest and damages. That's roughly $22,000. You can pay it now, or we can sue and add legal fees to the amount you owe. I don't have that kind of cash available, Amber protested. You have investments, Preston said coldly. Liquidate them. Those are my retirement funds. Built on stolen money, Preston shot back. You'll pay back every cent, or I'll make sure everyone in the financial industry knows you built your career on theft and fraud. Your reputation will be worthless. Amber looked around desperately, but found no support. Even her bridesmaids had backed away, clearly wanting no association with the scandal. Fine, she finally said, her voice bitter. I'll pay it. Both of you will sign legally binding agreements, Marcus said. Tonight, before anyone leaves this reception. I'll draw up the documents right now. And the life insurance money? I asked quietly, looking at Catherine. Dad wanted both his daughters taken care of. You kept it all. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then, in a defeated voice, I'll split it. Half of what's left. 3/4, I countered. You've had 8 years to spend it. I deserve compensation for what you put me through. That's not fair, Catherine protested weakly. Neither was stealing from me for 8 years, I replied. 3/4, or we pursue every legal option Marcus just outlined. Catherine nodded, tears finally appearing in her eyes. But I felt no satisfaction in seeing her cry, just exhaustion and relief. Over the next hour, Marcus drafted agreements on his tablet. Catherine and Amber signed them, witnessed by a dozen guests who stepped forward voluntarily. Preston arranged for immediate wire transfers from Amber's investment accounts. Catherine wrote a check from the life insurance account, her hand shaking as she did so. By the end of it, I had documentation promising me over $120,000, money that had always been rightfully mine, and Dylan's. Preston approached me as things were winding down. The reception hall was nearly empty now, guests having left in clusters, whispering excitedly about the drama they'd witnessed. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," he said. "I'm sorry my investigation led to all this coming out publicly." "Don't be sorry," I said. "If you hadn't hired that investigator, I might have gone my whole life not knowing the truth. Dylan might never have met his father. They stole from us, but you helped us get justice." "What will you do now?" Preston asked. "Pay off my debts," I said, holding Dylan close. "Finish my nursing degree. Maybe take Dylan on a real vacation for the first time in his life. Build a future." Diane hugged me tightly. "You have my number now. Please stay in touch. I meant what I said earlier. You're remarkable." As we finally prepared to leave, Aunt Helen stopped me at the door. "I have something else for you," she said, pressing an envelope into my hands. "Your father wrote you a letter before he died. He gave it to me and made me promise to give it to you when the time was right. I think tonight is that time." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, in Dad's familiar handwriting, was a letter. "My dearest Esperanza," it read. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope Helen had the courage to stand up for you when you needed it most. I know your mother and sister will not be kind. I know they'll make you feel small and worthless. But you are neither of those things. You are strong, brave, and full of love. Dylan is lucky to have you as his mother. You are the daughter I'm most proud of. Not because you're perfect, but because you keep going even when life is hard. You have my stubbornness and your grandmother's heart. That's a powerful combination. Never let anyone make you believe you're less than extraordinary. I love you always, Dad." I broke down completely then, sobbing in the doorway of the reception hall. Dylan hugged me tight, and Aunt Helen rubbed my back while I cried. 8 years of pain and shame poured out of me, but underneath it, I felt something new. Something that had been buried for so long, I'd almost forgotten it existed. Hope. 6 months have passed since that disastrous, life-changing wedding reception. I'm sitting in my new apartment, not the cramped studio Dylan and I shared for years, but an actual 2-bedroom with a real kitchen and a living room that gets morning sunlight. Dylan's room has posters of astronauts and planets. Mine has my nursing degree framed on the wall. Yes, I finished. I graduated at the top of my online program, and 2 weeks later, I started working as a registered nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital. I work in pediatrics, helping kids who are scared and sick, using all the lessons I learned from taking care of Dylan when he was little. The money changed things. Not just practically, though it did that too. With my debts paid off and some savings in the bank, I could breathe for the first time in 8 years. But more than that, getting justice changed something inside me. It broke the spell my mother and sister had cast, the one that made me believe I deserved to suffer. Catherine and Amber both faced consequences. Not criminal ones, though Marcus said we could have pursued that if we'd wanted. The public humiliation was punishment enough. The recording went viral, shared thousands of times on social media. Catherine lost her position on the charity board she'd been so proud of. Amber was let go from her investment firm quietly, a mutual parting of ways that everyone understood meant she'd been fired. I haven't spoken to either of them since that night. They tried to reach out a few times at first, emails and texts that were more defensive than apologetic. I blocked them. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear if they've genuinely changed, if they've learned anything. But that day isn't today, and it might never come. I've stopped feeling guilty about that. Dylan, though. Dylan has blossomed. Meeting Garrett was awkward at first. We arranged it carefully, with a child psychologist present for the first few meetings. Garrett was patient and gentle, letting Dylan set the pace. They started with an hour at a park, then lunch, then a science museum visit that Dylan talked about for days. Now they see each other every other weekend. Garrett drives 3 hours each way to spend time with his son. He's teaching Dylan about engineering and coding. Dylan started calling him Dad, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Garrett and I won't be getting back together. We're different people than we were 8 years ago. He's married to a woman named Sarah, who's been nothing but kind to Dylan. I'm dating someone too. His name is Andrew, and he's a teacher at Dylan's school. We met at a parent-teacher conference when he told me what a bright, thoughtful student Dylan was. When I started crying from happiness at hearing my son praised instead of mocked, Andrew handed me tissues and waited patiently until I could explain. He didn't run. He listened. He said Dylan sounded like an amazing kid. Then he asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime. We've been together for 3 months now, taking things slow, but it feels right. He thinks I'm strong, impressive. He uses words like resilient and determined, not disappointing, not embarrassing, not a mistake. Aunt Helen has become the grandmother Dylan always deserved. She picks him up from school on Wednesdays, and they bake together. She tells him stories about my father, keeping his memory alive. She's apologized countless times for not being braver sooner, but I've forgiven her. She did what she could, and in the end, she stood up when it mattered most. Diane Blackwell stayed in touch too. She sends Dylan birthday presents and occasional emails checking in on how we're doing. Preston married someone else about 8 months after his disaster wedding. Someone who, according to Diane, is genuinely kind and has never stolen from anyone. I'm happy for him. He changed my life by standing up at that reception. I think about that night often. The humiliation of Amber's speech, the cruelty in Catherine's voice, the moment Dylan's hand found mine under the table, and then Preston standing up, his face white with anger. If he hadn't hired that investigator, I might have gone my whole life not knowing the truth. Dylan might never have met his father. I'd still be carrying shame that was never mine to bear, still believing I was the problem. But I'm not the problem. I never was. For 8 years, I let other people's inability to love me define my worth. I accepted their version of my story, the one where I was a disappointment, a burden, a mistake. I carried guilt for my father's death, even though it wasn't my fault. I apologized for taking up space in the world. That wedding day shattered all of it. The truth came out like water breaking through a dam. And in the flood of revelations, I finally saw clearly. The problem wasn't me. It was them. Their cruelty. Their theft. Their lies. My son is not a mistake. He's the greatest gift of my life. Getting pregnant young wasn't ideal, but it wasn't a moral failing. Garrett's abandonment, which turned out not to be abandonment at all, wasn't because I was unlovable. Working 2 jobs while going to school wasn't shameful. It was strength. I've learned that real family isn't always blood. Aunt Helen, Diane, Marcus, even Preston in that crucial moment, they showed me more love and support than my own mother and sister ever did. Family is the people who see you truly, who stand beside you when things get hard, who believe in your worth even when you've forgotten it yourself. I've learned that shame can be passed down like an inheritance, but you don't have to accept it. You can examine it, see that it doesn't belong to you, and put it down. Catherine's shame about having an unmarried pregnant daughter? That was her shame, rooted in her need for social approval. Not mine. Amber's cruelty? That came from her own insecurity and jealousy, not from anything I did wrong. I've learned that speaking up, fighting back, demanding justice, those aren't acts of selfishness. They're acts of self-respect. For years I stayed quiet to keep the peace. But that peace was bought with my pain. Real peace comes from boundaries, from refusing to accept mistreatment, from standing up and saying, no more. Most importantly, I've learned that perfection isn't necessary for worth. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. My life hasn't followed a traditional path, but I'm enough. I've always been enough. My love for Dylan, my determination to build a better life, my ability to keep going even when things were impossibly hard, those matter more than any wedding or career achievement or family approval. Dylan and I are making dinner together right now. Just spaghetti and salad, nothing fancy, but he's helping me stir the sauce and telling me about a project at school. Andrew's coming over later. We're going to watch a movie. It's ordinary, simple, perfect. This is what happiness looks like. Not a perfect wedding with 300 guests, not wealth or status or family approval, just love and safety and the freedom to be exactly who we are. I look at Dylan, now 8 years old, confident and happy in ways he never was before. He knows his father. He has a grandmother who adores him. He sees his mother thriving instead of just surviving. He's learning that love doesn't require perfection. It requires presence and authenticity and effort. Sometimes we have to break completely before we can rebuild ourselves into who we were always meant to be. That wedding reception broke me open, but it also freed me. The truth, as painful as it was to hear, set me free from years of lies and manipulation. I'm not thankful for the cruelty I experienced, but I'm grateful for the clarity it eventually brought. I'm grateful for the people who stood up for me. I'm grateful for the strength I discovered in myself when I finally stopped apologizing for existing. If you're carrying shame that someone else put on you, I want you to know this. Examine it carefully. Ask yourself if it really belongs to you. Ask yourself if the people who made you feel worthless have earned the right to define you. The answer might surprise you. You are not your circumstances. You are not other people's opinions. You are not their disappointment, or their cruelty, or their failure to see your worth. You are the effort you put in every day. You are the love you give. You are the strength it takes to keep going when everything is hard. And that's more than enough. You've always been enough. My story didn't end at that wedding reception. It began there. The real story, the true story, the one where I finally stopped letting other people write my narrative. I'm writing my own story now, and it's a good one. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone made you feel ashamed of something you shouldn't have been ashamed of? How did you handle it? Did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Or are you still carrying that weight? Share your story in the comments. You might be surprised how many people understand exactly what you've been through. Your story matters. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone, that shame doesn't define them, that speaking up is worth it. Sometimes we all need reminders that we're stronger than we think. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you find the courage to put down any shame that doesn't belong to you. I hope you find people who see your worth. I hope you build a life that feels like home. You deserve that. You've always deserved that. Take care of yourselves. And remember, you're enough. You've always been enough.